I'm joined by the amazing Allison O'Toole, Dan Price, Andre Owen, Fred Kennedy, Chip Zdarsky. Chip, thanks for coming.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews for another episode of My Sketchy Goodness with the amazing Keith Grachow. Keith, thanks for coming on the show once again, being with me.
And it just, we're talking about this before. I apologize if I have a coughing fit during the show. That's one of the reasons why we had to cancel the last show a couple weeks ago. I was in the midst of Konrad. I think we're going to chat about what it's like to do a convention. This one was in the States, so we can talk about that. And if people have questions about what it's like, what it's like to go to a show in the States, and all that kind of stuff, then we can answer questions, or if you have questions yourself, Konrad.
Absolutely. That. I mean, I have a ton. I guess just to start with then, because I appreciate you might not have gone to a con as like a patron in some time. So I'll give my context of cons and con crud, though I'm certain it hits vendors way harder than any goer. But it is definitely interesting that you bring it up because of all the times I've gone to cons, like I have friends who are very health conscious. I remember, like, especially during the pandemic, all the masking we were doing, which was awesome. And I definitely remember between the excitement for myself, just going to a con and seeing all the people in the comics, the celebrities, the toys, the collectibles, all the stuff that I'm like, about, all of a sudden, yeah, you're riding that high for a while, especially if you're doing, say, Fan Expo for 3 days. And then once you come out of it, your body slowly goes, oh, wait a minute. You kind of just did a big thing. You were kind of around a lot of people. Maybe you picked something up. And, there's definitely as a con goer, there's like a mental and then physical break where you're like, okay, hold on. I need to deal with the fact that I just did what I did. But yeah, when it comes to being a vendor, being an artist, going there as a business, I guess just to start with, what is that even like?
Yeah. So, should I bring up what I'm going to share before we
yes, you know what? Yeah, let's do that, because this is going to be so cool.
Yeah. So this is we haven't done this before. I'm actually going to share a page from a current comic book I'm working on called Saltwater. Konrad's mentioned it before, and I can tell you that it's from issue number 5, and that's all I'm going to really say. you can infer what it is when is it being shared?
I can do it right now.
There we go. So you can infer from what it is, which is a crowd scene. We're looking down on the crowd, and that's about all. I'm not going to really answer questions about what I'm drawing on the subject of the story. I can answer questions about, like, what it is, the process of it, I guess. But otherwise, yeah, if anybody wants to know or anything about the actual context of the story itself, I don't want to give anything away. So no questions about that.
Fair. No, 100%. No spoilers. Gotta enjoy what we can enjoy. I will say, now that we're talking about cons and con crud, it looks like all of those people may be subject to it. But yeah, so as a vendor, because I've never gone as a vendor myself, what is that experience like?
Yeah, so I mean, and actually between a vendor and a artist and Artist Alley, it's going to be different too, because Artist Alley, generally you've got a 6-foot space or half that, so you can only bring so much stuff to put on that table. And a vendor may have like a huge, like a 10 by 20 foot space or larger. I'm not sure what the space sizing is for shows, but so they have to actually, they may have to spend days setting up. Whereas for me, I can show up the day of the show for like 30, 40 minutes prior and just usually an hour, but an hour prior to the show, and just takes me 20, 30 minutes to set up. And then when it comes to the process of doing a show, every artist is going to deal with it differently. Like for me personally, if it's a show that I've done many years, I always try to have something new. So I'm trying to premiere like a new comic book generally, is what I try to do if I can. So that's with Fan Expo and Toronto Comic Con being in March, Fan Expo being in August. I'll have like 2 different things that I'm premiering. So there's a lot of stress with that for me, because I'm like having to make sure I've got it finished and then sent to the printer and then back from the printer in time for me to, hopefully it's okay. And then start promoting it, because I want to make sure I've got it. So I'm starting to promote it to say, yeah, it's here and you can expect to get it when I'm at the show. So there's a lot of stress with that, prepping for that. And then on top of that, I might even do some original art to prepare for the show, or sometimes I'm taking on commissions. So I have to have a commission ready for the show. So there can be a lot for an artist to get ready for the show. And then there's little things you're doing here. You're making sure you have, for me, making sure I've got like my books, all the books.
Have a sip, no stress.
And make sure that, sometimes I have to order books from the printer that are reprint, books, or, so it'll be like a day before the show of all that kind of prep as well.
Wow.
And then if you're traveling to the show, if you're coming from a far distance, usually I generally like getting there at least a day. Well, like I don't want to get to the show like the day of or even the day before. Or if I do get the day before, it's like earlier in the day. You never know if you're flying, if you're going to have some kind of delay for whatever reason. And unfortunately with airlines, that's very likely to happen. You want to make sure you have time. And then of course, depending on if it's a new show you're doing, like I just did Fan Expo Philly. It was my first time ever doing that show. I've never been to that area before. I've done shows out in the Midwest, like in Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana and all that stuff, but I've never done one in Pennsylvania before. So I drove, and it was a long drive, and that took a bit out of me. I did get there a bit, like a few days before, because of my parents are thinking of moving to that area. So I had dual purpose doing that show, to be honest with you. I wanted to help my parents for the reason of seeing if they can find, or get a sense of the area they may want to live in. But then doing the show itself, I was very unfamiliar with the area to get to the show. And so I was driving in, and that was very stressful for me. I don't like driving in cities. Like I don't like driving in big cities like New York or Toronto. Philly, similar, because there's oftentimes there's a different kind of pace of driving that I find when you're in cities where people are they're trying to get from A to B in a much faster rate than other places where people are like, go ahead of me or whatever. It's just I always find it's a little stressful in that way. So the driving part of it, figuring out where to park, all that stuff is an added stress. And then the show itself, which was a great show. I enjoyed myself. I had some great neighbors. I met people that in the industry that I've been fans of for decades.
Awesome.
And it was like having that conversations with people, you know, about process and life and all that was really cool. So that's always really rewarding for me. And then meeting new people, making new fans and new friends and all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a lot of reward to it. But then, of course, you are being exposed to a lot of people. You're probably not getting a lot of sleep because of all the things you have to do to get, you know, for me, in my case, I had to drive back to where I was staying every night. Some people just stay at the hotel, which, you know, it takes that kind of stress off, so they can actually get better sleep. But you know, I'm trying to figure out like how to make this so that it's not cost prohibitive, right? And that's another factor you have to take into when you're doing a show is like if you're going to go, and what is it going to cost you to bring all of your books? What is it going to cost you to stay somewhere? What's the cost of transportation, food, parking? If the show itself, you know, if you have to pay for a table, or sometimes you have to pay for a business license, and you have to pay taxes on that.
Oh,
yeah,
I never even thought about that.
Oh yeah, that happened when I did New Orleans earlier this year. You had to pay a license to work for a day or a weekend in New Orleans, and then you have to pay taxes for the city taxes for what you're making, right? And so, you know, again, it was a trade-off for me having being a guest at the show, so I was okay with it, but. You know, it is one of those things where there's a lot of factors involved, and then of course there's no guarantee you're gonna make sales, you know, that you would normally make if you were like for me doing a show, and I had to remind myself of this. I'm going, my sales are like 30% less than what I normally make, but then I'm going, but nobody knows who I am here, like you know,
you're a new face,
and so. When I do a Toronto or Fan Expo or whatever local show I do, or even some of the shows I've done in the States where I've done them so many years, I have a fan base in at that show. So
that's cool.
I know it is. It's kind of like you have somewhere around 20 or 30% of people that are looking for you, or 20 to 30% of your sales are people that have bought from you in the past and are looking for you specifically. Or if they happen to walk by you and you go, hey, you know, and they go, oh yeah, I was looking for you, whatever it is. And then you're making that, it's just an automatic sale for the most part, a lot of times. And so for me, going to a new place, I keep on forgetting, I'm going, why were my sales so low? And I'm going, oh, nobody knew who I was. No, so now it's kind of like, okay, well, I did pretty good. It wasn't cost prohibitive. So even though I didn't make as much as I normally do, you know, it's still worth for me to go back next year because, you know, now there's going to be people who go, oh yeah, I bought your issue number 1 of Saltwater. Yeah, I want to get the rest of them now. Right. And so that's something that, you know, you have to take into consideration. Are you going to a place that you've never been to before? Or is this, you know, do you have some kind of fan base already, right? And so all those things kind of factor in to doing a show, and then you know, like the I guess the adrenaline that you're going through to. I'm a salesperson. I talk a lot when I'm at shows. I don't do a lot of commission work. You know what I'm like, Konrad.
Oh yeah, you're great. Genuinely.
I'm talking all the time, and that's how I am able to make as many sales as I do, is because I'm anybody that walks by my table, hey, this is what I'm doing, come to the table and see who I am and through my art and if it's interesting to you, you know, yeah, please buy something. And so that's a lot of energy spent. And I try to stay on schedule with my eating and my sleep, but it's really, really hard to do that because you're just by the nature of the show. Like I'm usually in bed by 10 o'clock, but if I'm not getting home till 10, then it's not.
Then you gotta wind down and
yeah, all that kind of stuff. So, all those things that, especially when you start to get, if you're a younger person, 20s and 30s, you can you don't necessarily have to worry about that kind of stuff unless you have like allergies or food, you have certain foods you have to eat. But as I've gotten older, I've become much more aware of like where my energy is coming from and how do I make sure that I'm healthy and not hurting myself. And so, these are all the things that come into play when you're doing a show. And then, unfortunately, there's a good 50% chance I'm going to come away from a show with Konrad or something that I'm not 100% sure if what I have was an allergy induced as well, because where I was like suburbs and lots of the pollen was falling around and just like kind of starts hitting you and again, like it's a combination of not getting a lot of sleep and potential allergies. So unfortunately I was out of commission for a couple of days because of that. And then I was able to work. Thankfully I was able to work after 2 or 3 days of being off, but I can't do like podcasts and stuff because I'm choking, coughing like half the time. So it doesn't.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear that, right?
Well, you know what? It's one thing that sort of mentioned, and we've talked about this earlier in a previous episode, where your sales ability, your knowledge in the sales discussion, I'll say, is absolutely amazing at cons. The last con that we went to together, the Toronto Comic Con, where you kindly gave me your spare pass to be able to accompany you. It was really cool to be able to watch you do your thing and like see you up. You were on. You were, people were coming by. The way that you were talking to them, engaging with them, and really engaging with them, and not just like, "Hey, folks, how's it going? Here's my book." You were like, you're on. You're getting them in, which I think is so incredible. But I think, one thing that seeing that made me realize is just how incredible it is and how much work it is, because it gives me more context as a con goer and a podcaster, I guess, about why you might go to a con and see your favorite artists, or if you're there for a specific artist or writer, why you might see them sitting at a table with their pad just drawing, right? Like very disengaged, because to be on like that, especially if you have any level of notoriety or fame where people want to come up and talk to you and have someone like me come up and nerd out and go like, "Oh my God, I absolutely love your work. And, it was so cool when you did this panel and I love this. And how did you do this?" And blah, 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 blah. I can totally get how like an 8-hour day of that would be exhausting. And then doing that 3 days in a row or more, depending on the con, like, yeah, that would be killer in and of itself, just to be on like that. But then to go through that the way you do it, where you're like engaged, you're selling, you're getting your book out there. Yeah, it's astounding the way you do that. And I highly encourage people who are watching this, go back to our previous episodes, because you beautifully explained it on how you do it, why you do it, the methods you use. I think it's fantastic. That being said, Keith, you're drawing a crowd. Now, again, no spoilers, no context. All we can see is the fact that there's a crowd and they look like they're wearing some funky clothes. What is in a crowd here? How do you do a good crowd scene without getting sort of lost in the sauce, Keith?
Well, I mean, for me as the artist, I'm just trying to like, what's an interesting angle to draw people at? What's the story require you to be doing? Like, obviously from this you can infer that we're looking down at the crowd, and why are you looking down at the crowd? What's the purpose of that? And so that's part of the reasoning why, the decision you make in regards to like what angle you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is it's a crowd, so you kind of want to see people, but there's different ways you can do it. You can approach it like if you're straight on to the crowd, then you can just see like the people in the front, and then people in the mid ground would maybe you'd see like hands or whatever, and then people in the background, maybe it's all in shadow. Like, I mean, it just really depends. It's like when I do a crowd scene for like a hockey, a comic that I've done, where you're in arenas, you're looking up at people. So that's a little bit of a different thing too. It's the functionality of the way that an arena is with the seats going up. So you're going to see people in like a regimented kind of way.
Yeah, very.
And then for me, like I'm not a George Perez type. I don't draw every person in the background. And you can tell with him, he loved doing that kind of stuff. So, for me personally, like I kind of, I don't think we're going to get there, but you can see like if there's a lot of people in there. I don't think I'm going to like, you don't need to draw every detail on the person that's, all the way back here, right? There's no necessity because the person looking at it isn't going to take that in. They're going to look at that crowd scene for like, I don't know, 2 seconds at best, right? And then, so you just want to give an energy to it, that whatever the energy needs to be, like that people are interacting with each other, or they're interacting with whoever they're looking at. Mm-hmm. And so, like all those things are going to play into that crowd scene. And of course, variety of people, variety of poses, that those are all factors too, right? So for me, I just want to be, like engaged with what I'm drawing. And I'm hoping that like that I'm actually thinking this character here, I think I'm gonna redraw it because I'm not sure exactly what the heck he's doing. So I may have to like actually figure that out a little bit better. But there's all different factors involved with a crowd scene. And I always like looking personally, if I'm reading a comic book and the artist is just great when it comes to like gestures and personality. I love looking at like some of these crowd scenes, like like a New York crowd scene where you have like people just in the background talking on the phone, drinking coffee, and of course the main characters are up front saying something. But for me as a visual artist, as the comic book creator, I like to see how other people approach like those secondary characters that are, you never see them again potentially, but maybe, there's some really interesting kind of poses that they're in. I'm sure there's for sure an art to a crowd scene. And I think that you just have to study, you can study like photos of people in crowds. I'm using a reference. I'm not looking at the reference at the moment, but I was using a reference for this, I think, initially to get some ideas for like how I would approach this. And those are always really good. There's plenty of crowds. You just Google crowd scenes and then you can find a bunch of them. So
awesome. It's one thing where I've always enjoyed a crowd scene because, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this. When I read a comic, like a standard floppy, like 24 to 30 pages, I'm a slow reader, admittedly, but it takes me like 30 minutes because I have very intentionally gone, like just doing what I do and wanting to understand it. I will at times have read a comic from like front to back, gotten the story, and I'll go back and actually just look at everything really slow. Because I don't want to miss this kind of stuff because I think this is the cool stuff. Where, like you said, like you will probably take. Well, I'm not sure. I imagine that to draw that page from concept to finish go to print, I imagine that's going to be like a couple days work. So like when I think about that, and I think that someone could open that book up and just go, huh, and turn the page because they've read the text on it, especially if that particular shot only has like, oh my god, yes, or oh hello, or whatever it is, like a big couple of word balloons, maybe one word balloon with a couple words. The actual page turn would be like I said, 2 seconds. So yeah, I always like to go back and actually really look, because I think the details that you're going to be able to cram in there, and often I find a lot of artists like to put fun stuff in crowds anyway. So it's always a big thing for me. So again, folks out there, read your comics slow, enjoy the art. Real quick over on Instagram, Beware the Lunatic says, yes, Keith. So thank you kindly.
Hey, how you doing, my friend?
Hell yeah. And also, folks, if you would like to support the show, down in the description, you will find some links where you can click on it and basically donate a little bit of money to the show to help Keith pay for software, help pay for the streaming service, or whatever it might be that we decide to use to enhance the show. The fact that, Keith, you can draw while talking still blows my mind, because I'm pretty sure that the first guy who's seemingly finished, he didn't exist prior to this show starting, or I think maybe he was a head and an arm. So it blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I it's finding things that I don't have to put too much focus into. Like I've already laid this out, so and I knew this is gonna, to your point, this is gonna take me a little while to do. So I'm like, well, it's not giving anything away. I already laid it out well enough that I can probably draw a few of the characters, and they're not like, I can say they're not really main characters, so I don't have to like reference them from making sure that I'm getting all the details right, because it's the first time I'm drawing them, right? So
right on.
Yeah, certain things I think I can get away with in regards to doing live, and then certain things would take a lot more. Like I unfortunately, if you were like, hey, can I watch you actually create a thumbnail for something, I'd be like, I don't, unless it's like a very simple thing or something I've drawn lots of times. I don't think it's going to work, because it would require a lot of focus in regards to making sure it laid out well. But there are, listen, I was next to this little name drop here. I was next to Scott Hanna, who's a very well-known comic book artist, inker for Marvel. He's got the record for the most comic book pages inked. And we had this conversation, actually, like, what can you draw? And while engaging in people come up to the table who want you to sign the book or do a, who are just wanting to talk to you about something that you've done in the past. And he was very nice, very sweet guy, very, very giving in regards to his time. And he did say to me, he said, the one thing that I will not, like, you may get no responses from me, or I may give you a dirty look, is if I'm like in the midst of like painting something. So he'll do like watercolor to when he's doing like a commission at a show, he'll do like watercolors on it, and so, or marker work or something. Yeah, he's a teacher as well. So that was one thing. He's like, yeah. So anytime you see me doing that, just you can. I'm not gonna acknowledge you, right? I'm like, okay, that's fair. Yeah, but anything else, like inking, like penciling, he's great at it. Like he has the tools for all of those things so well formulated that he's able to have conversations. He's I think a rarity in that. He called himself, he's insane, because the amount of work he can do in a short period of time, is not the norm. And it may be a talent, I'm not sure, but it could be that he's learned how to create the symbols of art in a way that he's he just knows inside and out, like how to figure out what things are supposed to be very quickly. He's just learned how to do them over time. His mom was a painter, so I think he learned a lot of it from her. Anyway, yeah, he's just one of those. He can like do 3 issues a month, inking 3 issues a month, and there's not many people. So you have to pair him up with a penciler who can do that, who's very quick as well, right?
Or 3 pencilers.
Oh my God. But he also, working with people that, because he needs, if he can't be waiting necessarily for pages, I think, from somebody who takes like a long time. It's a little bit, I mean, he probably does. I think he said he likes having like 1 or 2 really fast pencilers that let him finish. And then he may take somebody on. He doesn't have choice, obviously, who necessarily when he's like paired up, but he in preference of like it's where he works with like John Romita Jr. and he's worked with like Mark Bagley, who are really they're fast and they're workhorses like him, and also I think they let him. I don't know about Mark Bagley, but I know John Romita Jr. lets him do a lot of finishes.
Oh, okay. So Romita might like thumbnail it all out, have the pencils done, but he'll be like, you know what, using the ink, flush it out, add all the shadows, do your thing. Interesting. That's wild though, to be able to do 3 issues a month, like
for 30 years. Like he's done 24,000 pages of inks, and nobody else has done. I think that he said that the person, there's somebody. 19,000 maybe, or 20, I can't remember. Somebody. So
it's not even close. Like it's
no,
huge.
The inker was like who was the inker? It was an inker from the 70s who had that many pages at that time. So there's nobody near him now that he's but there's like and then of course you've got like it becomes a bit of a different story when you've got like if it's penciler versus inker or colorist, writers, that kind of thing. So he's just incredibly fast, and he's got high skill set when it comes to what he's doing. And so it was really cool watching him work, for sure.
Oh, I bet. Like it's one thing though that I find interesting where I guess the argument could be made, and again, this clearly incredibly insanely talented to be able to do what he does for all the biggest companies and just wanting to go at it and do that. But my question is like, and again, I suppose he'd have to answer it, but in a hypothetical, given that you've attained that level of skill where you can just talk while doing your thing and not have it not take up that much of your conscious bandwidth, I guess.
Yeah.
My question or my thought would be, then why not push yourself, push your art to the point where it is detailed and interesting enough that it does, because you're clearly capable, right? Like, I don't know. And then I guess there's also a point where you can hit where you're like, well, but then you're just overworking it. This guy's just that well done, and he has his style set up.
But you're talking about somebody. There's a difference between doing a con show and working at home.
Well, that too, yeah.
Yeah, like he's what he's talking about. He can do 3 issues at home. He's, like essentially has a partner who has the understanding of what he does, so that he can do that amount of work, the amount of time it takes on a daily basis for him to do it. And there's certain factors that are involved with like in his case, Like in some people's cases, I mean, you've got kids, you have to spend time with them, right? So, like there's certain factors that like the fact that he can do that much, um, there's things that allowed him to get to that ability to do that much on
Yeah.
top of his skill set. And so there are people that I don't know if given certain, like it's kind of like the other way. There's a similar kind of thought process that I've had when it comes to like the Beatles.
Oh.
Because the Beatles, when they got to the point where they were like well known, getting number one singles, and just I think Paul McCartney was the one that was driving them to make more and more music. They had people there that were their handlers that were like, what do you want to eat? What do you need for like your home? What equipment do you need? Like people that were there to essentially make sure that all they did was create, right? That was
Yeah, they
their
didn't have to
thing.
think about life.
And so when you have that kind of ability to, when you were privileged enough to be able to go and just the only thing you have to think about really on a daily basis is like, like the song,
Mhm.
or the page that you're drawing on. It allows for you to hopefully create more.
Yeah, no
Right? You don't
kidding.
have things, distract. If you're sick, you have a doctor come to you, right? Like
Oh,
that's that. I mean, I'm not saying that's the case with Scott Hanna. I'm just saying,
I mean, who
when you
knows,
have,
right?
yeah, exactly. No, but I'm saying when you have like, there's certain things that can get in the way of you or help you to have more output or more focus. Um, and I guess it just depends, right? Like some people, I mean, now here's another factor too. If you want to deal with, again, this is not Scott Hanna that I'm talking about here. This is just generic. If you have mental health, if you're,
Yeah.
if you're on a daily basis, like, ADHD or
Oh,
bipolar or manic, depression or whatever it is, extreme anxiety, things that prevent you from being able to be, at the drawing board. Excuse me.
yeah.
And so, those are all things, or physical. If you have physical things going on too, right? So, like if you have extreme allergies, if you can't sit or stand for extreme amount of times because of pain, right? Who knows, right? There's
Yeah,
all different
exactly.
things that could prevent you from getting to that ability to be able to create and the amount of time you'd want to be able to create. So, those are all things so if you are that person that has, and I feel like I am, that I have the ability to for the most part, there's not a lot of things in my life that distract me from being able to do this.
Mhm.
But that's a consideration for some people that, there's people that they've had to decide, do I create or am I in a relationship? Because being in a relationship requires a certain kind of time that you're going to spend with the other person. And if you're not willing to do that, then, that's going to be a problem for the other person. It's not fair for them. Right. So,
Yeah, 100%. Oh, the life of an artist.
yeah, yeah.
That being said, over on Instagram, we've had a few comments. So one, Leo has commented, you might want to explain the basics in comics creation, illustration, inker, writer, colorist, pencils. So
It's my
Scott
dad.
Hanna, yes.
Just as an FYI. Hey, Dad.
So
Creation.
yeah, so basically on that, so Scott Hanna, the part that he does, specifically Keith, you were saying the inking. So it's basically in comic illustration, you start with the writing. Your artists would then look at the script and go, cool, start thumbnailing, as Keith calls it, which is basically the rough drawing, and then penciler would have done that, would go in and possibly, depending on the medium they're using and their tool set and whatever, use pencils and actually make like a finer line drawing to show all of that good stuff. And then an inker would come in, if it's not actually the same artist, much like Keith here, and then go over top of that and do the inks, which is basically what you're doing right now.
Yeah, and we were talking before, Dad, about finishing. So that's where the penciler isn't going to make, they're not going to like go into as much detail. They're going to leave, maybe they'll leave backgrounds unfinished, or just the penciler, if it's a good penciler inker team, they're going to have like a shorthand. They're going to know enough to, the penciler's going to leave just the hint of like where light and shadow are going to be, and the structure of things and the anatomy and all that kind of stuff, the characters, the details of the characters. And of course, the penciler may choose to put more detail into certain things because they want to. But when a inker, especially if the inker is a good artist themselves, because that's not always the case. Inkers, so I can go back to Scott Hanna. Scott Hanna said he could have been a penciler, he could have been an inker, but he realized that because he was as fast as he would probably make more money as an inker.
Interesting.
And that's why he went into doing the inking part of it. But he's a fine artist. He's a good commercial artist, and because of that, he understands anatomy and composition and light, and all that kind of stuff. So he understands. He would be able to take a penciler's page and be able to make sure it looks correct. And sometimes a penciler, like sometimes the anatomy is wrong, or the light is wrong, and so the inker may decide to use their skill set to change it. And I guess depending on the team you have, you may want to, if it's somebody you're unfamiliar with, you may want to have a conversation with them, going, "Hey, do you mean for this light to be hitting here, but then it's hitting here on the same panel in a different way, like, or the way that you drew this character is a little bit off. Are you okay if I I don't know. I mean, I'm generally I'm a one person team when it comes to the art part of it. I've worked with colors before. I've worked with like letters and writers, obviously, or what I mainly work with. But when it comes to like penciling and inking, I've done it myself. So I very rarely have I worked with somebody where I pass off my pencils or I'm inking somebody.
Okay. And also, Keith, I absolutely love and appreciate the vocabulary gymnastics you're doing, where you could say very bluntly and perhaps a little rudely, where an inker can correct some perhaps penciling mistakes. But yes, I get what you're getting at, especially if it's a highly collaborative team. That being said, Kevin Manklow is in the chat as well. He says, "What's the homies, looking good?" Yeah, he then asks, "How tight do you pencil for an inker, Keith?" Which you've kind of answered, you perhaps don't, but hypothetically, if you were going to work with an inker, how tight do you think you would pencil?
Enough so that the inker doesn't have to figure out what they're doing. Doesn't have to work, like kind of what I was just saying before. If you have a penciler that has some weaknesses in regards to what they're doing, I wouldn't want to have to make an inker. I would want the inker to be able to do the job that allows them to do the best job they can. And so if, and I understanding thinking process myself, I think I'd love for them to do texture and I think there's a lot of fun in regards to like if, depth of field and all that kind of stuff, giving them that kind of freedom to play around with some of the spotting of blacks, which is essentially where you lay black areas into an illustration so that your eye goes a certain way. Like letting the rendering, the way that the line, the type of line that the inker would use, that's the kind of stuff that an inker, I would imagine, would want to have fun. There are pencilers that make it so tight that you can basically take their pencils and darken them and make them look like inks. And I'm not sure how much fun that is for an inker, because that's just essentially like copying something again. And then, again, it just depends on the level of skill that the inker has. When I have worked with inkers before, it was a little bit. It's always a hard part when you're working with somebody you don't know very well, and they're inferring, like, you may have hinted at where you think light should go, and they don't understand that, and they're drawing they're rendering in, and you're going, but the light source is over, like their light source coming from here, and you're making, like, there's no consistent light source. Like, it's just, I'm not sure what you're doing, and there's a very specific reason where I made the light source coming from, like this area, because there's a window in the next scene. But now, now it doesn't make any sense, right? You're so that's something that, if you have an inker that doesn't understand that kind of stuff, can make it, it can mess the drawing up, right? So there's, or if they don't understand, like, depth of field, like foreground, midground, and background, and the way they're inking things, it's hard to tell where, like, things are coming in forward and things are receding.
Right. Yeah.
Again, that's tough. Or sometimes an inker has certain, like, flair, like certain ways that they do something that you go, I wouldn't have done that. Like, it's not my thing, and it's not necessarily that it's wrong, but I don't like it. Like, I guess one example that stands out in my head is when you have like something, let's say you have two characters in the foreground, like, fighting each other, and then you have, like, stuff in the background. You may have, like, some inkers may outline the two characters so that they pop out more, and there's nothing wrong with that, but at the same time, you may go, but it almost makes them feel like they're not part of the scene now. And so, it's a decision that the inker made that I wouldn't have made, because I would have wanted, it's a balance. Like, the characters in the foreground, they're bigger, so it's okay that they kind of blend a little bit into the midground a bit. But now that you've popped them out so much, now they don't even feel like they belong in the midground. So, but that, I can't say that it's wrong per se, because, it's a stylistic choice. So yeah, I mean, it just, there's a lot of factors. I mean, my thing always, when I work with, like, I've worked with a colorist, Esther Segura. I worked with her for a few years on a project, and I mean, I think that it took me a little while to get used to her coloring style. Initially, I was like, I wouldn't have done it that way. I couldn't say there was anything wrong with it. I just was like, I wouldn't have done it that way. So it took me a while to kind of go, this isn't about me. It's about the team, and it's about, the creator wanted a certain look color-wise too. So, his preference for the way that the colors looked weren't necessarily in line with the way I would have done it, right? But, again, Esther did a great job, and I think she's a really good artist, and, it just, but that is, like, that's part of working with somebody, is you have to kind of compromise sometimes in regards to what you would do versus what they're doing, and you have to let go, because it's not necessarily about you per se. It could be about the tool, it could be about the look of the book, and but it is always interesting to talk to. I talk to other artists about this, and even with, like, when you have an artist who's working with a well-known, some other well-known creator, like an inker or a colorist, and they are doing it in a way that they're not appreciated, or they wouldn't do it the same way. It's like, so you can be a really amazing inker, really highly skilled inker, but even still, if the penciler is like, it's not quite the way I'd want it, like, because you're usually your best, oftentimes you know what you would want to do, right?
Yeah.
But and then on the other side of it, you may work with somebody that's like makes everything you do so much better, right? That's the hope too,
100%.
right?
Interesting. So real quick, in the chat from Twitch, Amin underscore, I'm gonna say this wrong, Bentumor, says, "Hello guys, what are you working on?" I let her know it's a new book you're working on. Can't give too much more detail, but just stay tuned. They say, "Think interesting." Well, good luck. Paul Kemp has come in once again. Paul, thank you so much.
Hey, Paul.
Saying, "Amazing illustration, Keith. Great to see Sketchy Goodness again. Thanks, Konrad." Paul, thank you so much. And then back over to Instagram. Keith says, "Good answers, Keith. Thanks." Or sorry, Kevin said that. And then Leo said, "This all goes to show that creating a finished comic takes a lot of work. Not easy. Definitely not. Not only do you have to do all of this stuff, but then if you aren't with a major publisher, you then have to come on to shows like mine and many other shows, and if not just pay for marketing, you have to market yourself, which is in and of itself a whole new job." That being said, Keith, we've got like 8 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So one thing that I'm curious about now, because I remember with everything we've talked about, so what came to mind for me was two things where I remember hearing when working on just about anything, Mike Mignola draws absolutely beautiful, high detailed pencils of everything. So if a statue is, say he drew like the oh my god, the famous statue from America, the came from France.
Statue of Liberty?
Thank you. Yes. If he drew the Statue of Liberty, he would draw like every little detail. And then basically, if he was going to ink it, say at night, and you were only going to see like the glow from the torch, he would just ink it and it would be gone. Like I've heard that he drew a thing of Hellboy with a big statue that had all crazy details, and he was like, "Well, it's only a small part lit," so he just like heavy inked it, and it was basically gone. I've also heard, I think it was McFarlane was inking for someone, or maybe McFarlane did the pencils and someone was inking his work. But they kind of, and whomever was telling the story, the pencils got inked a little too much and people weren't happy. So my question out of all of this is, and I don't think I've ever heard about this happening, which kind of blows my mind given the pooling of art that goes on and the pooling of creativity that goes into making a comic. How often, or maybe why not, don't writer, penciler, inker, colorist, whomever else get together at like the start once the script is done and do like a walkthrough to be like, hey, here's what we had in mind. Here's some initial concepts to sort of get on the same proverbial page. Chew on that for just a second. Amin has come back on with another question. I'm a graphic designer, but unfortunately, I'm not very good at sketching and drawing. Well, there's always time to practice. And if you're already a graphic designer, you've probably got the skill set baked into you. So go for it, my man.
Yeah, just draw every day, do doodles. We've talked about that. Listen to this podcast because there's lots of stuff we talk about. So go back into some of the earlier ones where we talk about, how to warm up for the day and get yourself started to help get you drawing what you see in your head or whatever it is. Well, I mean, so to answer your question, Konrad, and I've limited experience with this because I don't work with publishers very often. It's mainly like indie stuff. But my conversations I've had with with creative teams like Scott Hanna, sometimes you don't have the luxury of it. Like you're brought in on a book, and it's like you're there to help get that book out to print on time, and so you don't have the luxury of having that conversation with the team. Depending on the book, if you're like if you're in the middle of a run of comic books, you're coming on and following suit from another artist, and you just have to make sure that you're following that what you're doing is good for the story and doesn't jar the audience, right? So I'm not sure you may not have the luxury to go, well, why are they doing it this way, and let's change it up now. You know, like you're in the middle of something. Now if it's a like you know, a comic book idea and you're going to work with you know, like penciler or an inker, you know, like a writer, then that's when you can have conversations about like, well, what is this going to look like, and all that kind of stuff. But that's you have ownership over that, and you're starting from the beginning. So that's a different scenario too. So I just think it, you know, it depends. You know, it depends on how much control you have in the process. If you're hired onto it, if you're, you know, you may be like part owner, but also not fully owner. So, you know, somebody else may have more of a say in regards to like the direction something is going to go. I don't know in the case of like Todd McFarlane, I'm not sure. To me, he's like, he owns what he does. So I don't know, unless it was like when he was working on Spider-Man or something like that back in the day, where he may not have had control over like who was inking on top of his work. Because oftentimes I think, you know, when you work for Marvel or DC, they're just going to bring somebody in, and you're not necessarily, you may have suggestions and again, it depends if you're how much power you have. If you're a well-known writer, you may go, I would really like to get this penciler on this project, and this inker I think would look great, or whatever. You may ask, and if they're available, you may get them, right? You know, if you're friends with them already, then maybe it's a project you know, like when you Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley, right? Like they've worked together with so many, you know, Brian Michael Bendis may be like, I want to bring Mark Bagley on this, and I know he can do it because, you know, I talked to him and he said he'd be fine. You know, he can do 2 issues a month, right? So, you know, and then we can have that then he can have that conversation about like what it's going to look like and all that kind of stuff. So I think it just depends on the situation from project to project. But did that answer the question you were asking?
Yeah, it definitely did, because like it's like everything that goes into a comic is so huge. But like you said, if it's something like you're in the middle of a run, and my brain immediately went like, oh my God, what if you were like the guy who got brought on to ink 3 issues of Batman because the normal inker is sick or whatever? It's like, oh dang, yeah. Could you imagine like, oh yeah, here we need you to ink it, you know, Batman number 1084, 5, and 6 for us real quick. Like, oh my God, okay, cool. Let me just quickly review the last couple issues this person did, try to match up so it stylistically goes, and then do my own thing too. Like, yeah, that's craziness. It also makes me like, one thing that I've paid attention to, and I think early on in my journey through comics, like starting in 2011 with the New 52, because that's where I started with floppies. I distinctly remember being like, well, I want to read Batman. And then I had people who had been reading comics longer ask me, they're like, well, who do you want to read? And I was like, well, I want to read Batman. And like, they were like, well, what about like the writer, the artist? And I was like, oh, Batman. And they were like, okay, cool. So you're not there yet. And they basically told me, they were like, the moment you get into this a little more, you won't want to read Batman or X-Men or whatever. You'll probably want to read, at the time, Scott Snyder, John Hickman, whatever. And it was like, oh. And now that I've read a lot more and gotten into it, like one of the teams that stands out to me, because I love the artist, is Tony Daniel and Tomu Mori. I hope I said his name right. Because they're constantly together. Tony Daniel doing pencils, Tomu Mori doing, I believe, inks and colors. Because like every book I see Daniel on, I see Mori, and I'm like, okay. So they're buddies. They work together. That's their shtick. It's just like... I think he's a colorist. Miki, Miki.
Danny Mickey is an inker.
Yes. Yeah, I think. Inker. Yeah, and then I see him all the time with. Oh God, it might actually be Tony Daniel as well. I really like Tony Daniel's art. I think he does fabric so well, which is, I suppose, a really weird specific thing. But hey, I like it. Yeah. But yeah, I guess. Yeah, if you find someone, you stick with them.
But I think that also depends. See, here's the thing, though. It's also you have like editorial right? You have another layer where they want to get a book out that is going to excite the audience, so they buy the book, and they're going to, like, so for example, some creator, there's a reason why John Romita Jr. often gets paired with Scott Hanna. It's because they work well together. They know how to work together to get a book out at a high caliber like, especially if there's a time crunch for whatever reason, they both can get the book out on time, right? And that's the thing. An editor wants to know that the creative team is dependable, right? Now, of course, you may have, unfortunately, you may have an editor that micromanages and makes things worse for the writer and inker, and a colorist and letterer, the creative team, so that they can't get a book out on time, and that causes a whole bunch of problems for the other books, that if it's all interconnected in regards to like a bigger storyline or something, right? Yep. So there's all different factors involved with, and I don't know the ins and outs in regards to when it comes to like Marvel or DC. If it's a creator-owned book, that is probably an explanation why you have certain teams that you see quite often, like another one that comes to mind, Brian Michael Bendis and the guy he worked, Michael Avon, right? Like, they've worked together multiple times because obviously they like their friends and they know how to work together, and they have stories that they want to work on together. Now, the other part too is an editor may go, "Hey, Brian, we would like to get Michael on this 2-issue run. Can you, do you know if he's available?" "Yeah, sure." Ask him. "Yeah, he'd love to work on it, and we know he can get it out and on time because of his past," right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's always, if you have a new writer or a new inker, new person in the team who's never really done it before, that's always what can cause issues too, especially when you have, we'll wrap this up, but part of there's like the triangle of like, is it how fast are you, what kind of quality are you, and how nice are you, right? And you have to have two or three in play. If you're all three of them, if you're a nice person to work with and fast and high quality, then that's like the perfect golden triangle. But I think you have to have 2 of the 3 to make it. Maybe it's like a tripod or something. Maybe it's better if one doesn't try, you take one of the legs away to fall. But yeah, like if like, you have to make sure that the editor is always looking for at least 2 of those things. Like, are you good quality, and are you fun to work with? Sometimes you get somebody that's difficult to work with, even though they may be fast and they may be high quality, and that can cause problems for a team, right? That can always, like, especially if a creator is icing somebody out, right? Like, they're not communicating properly, and that's always cause for problems when you have other people that are trying to get their work done on time, and if they have other work that it's hindering them from working properly, right? So there's a lot to it. That's always there's a lot of moving parts when it comes, especially when you're dealing with like Marvel or DC, when they have multiple books coming out in a month, and a lot of those books are connected with other books, and you have to make sure they're all coordinated properly, right? It's really, really hard if you have somebody that's slowing things down, right? When
I can't imagine the editorial team that manages all of that, gets all the art done, whatever feedback and changes they want, and then released on time so it all works. Like, oh my God. Also, Leo commented very kindly. Thank you, Konrad. You're consistently a thoughtful and skillful interviewer. You're the perfect golden triangle. Well, thank you, Leo. That's very flattering. Much appreciated. I like doing this. But yes, Keith, we're past our hour. So that being said, all of that was wonderful. Absolutely, folks out there in YouTube land, on Twitch, on Instagram, wherever you are watching, whether you're watching live with us now or if you're catching this in the future at some point, we both hope you enjoyed. Keith continues to blow me away by drawing while talking, which is just but But yes, if you'd like to support the show, down below in the description, you will find some links. You can gladly help support us, whether that goes to pay for software for Keith to draw, for me to be able to stream and do my thing, whatever we might need, however much or little you'd like to give. If you'd like to, it would be much appreciated. Don't forget, like the stream, like the video, comment down below what you think of the drawing, comment what you think it is. If you know, no spoilers. And yeah, let us know what you thought of. If you drop some questions in the comments, we will be more than happy to get to them next time. In fact, I will make a point of it. And as always, do subscribe. And Keith, it was amazing to hang out with you tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to get through this without coughing too badly. So
I don't think bad at all. I feel like you're on the mend, and I'm happy to hear it. But yes, absolutely. I will see you again, hopefully in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we will see you out there. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2. Yeah, collector problem.